Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to Getting to Know You. I'm your host, Robert Jaquay. On today's program, we're going to be talking with Anne-Marie Barker Schwartz, who is the director and founder of the Musicians of Melwick, a local ensemble group. Along with Anne-Marie, we're going to have some special guests. So let's go meet her and her guests and talk about music. Before we start going and talking about the music in the concert, I want each of you to let our viewers know exactly who you are and how you got to this point, okay? So Anne-Marie, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I'm a violinist, and I play with Glimmerglass Opera Orchestra, and for many years I played with Albany Symphony, actually. And I founded Musicians of Melwick in 1999. I'm both the violinist and sort of the musical programming scapegoat. And I pick the things that we do. We do a lot of music from early America, and I do a lot of research at the New York State Library. And we put together programs that we play in a variety of historic and contemporary venues.
Okay. Lanfranco, it's your turn.
Hi, I'm Lanfranco. I am the conductor of the group. I think I'm a guest conductor of the group, but I conduct the orchestra of the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. I'm from Brazil, and I do some guest conducting around. And when I have enough time, I play the piano, which is quite difficult.
I'm a soprano, and I teach at Skidmore, where I took my very first voice lesson, and now I'm teaching there, and that's a lot of fun. And I also teach at Emma Willard School in Troy, and I have a lot of interest in German music. And I met Anne-Marie about 10 years ago when we were working on something in this building, actually. I've had a lot of fun. I made a debut at Chicago Lyric Opera, and I'm kind of a local girl who isn't local anymore, so, but I am local.
Very good, thank you. Anne-Marie, we're in the beautiful Westminster Presbyterian Church in downtown Albany, and this is where you happen to be rehearsing for a concert that's coming up with the Musicians of Melwick. And we're gonna talk a bit here, and then we're going to go back to the studio. So I'd like to talk about the concert and what the pieces are that you're going to be performing.
Certainly. It's a three-piece program. It opens with Hilary Tan's piano trio, Nothing Forgotten, which is actually the most contemporary of the pieces on the program. It was written in the late 1990s, and it's literary inspired. In fact, all the pieces are. The second piece is the seminal 1912 Pierrot Lunaire of Arnold Schoenberg, which is a wonderful piece for soprano who's not quite singing, but not quite just speaking. It's called Sprechstimme, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the interview. But it's a great piece for this reciter and also for chamber ensemble with violin, also viola, flute and piccolo, clarinet with bass clarinet, and then cello and piano. And then the program concludes with our own transcription by William Kerrigan of the four last songs of Richard Strauss, which are just glorious pieces.
Now, this is quite a mixture as far as types or sounds of music, and something that when someone comes to it, they might be attracted to the Strauss and have that sort of sound expectation. But then you go to the Schoenberg, which really is perhaps more challenging to the listener. So we're going to talk about the Schoenberg first. So why don't you let us know exactly what it's all about? Okay, before you answer your question, Anne-Marie, we're going to listen to a little bit of the rehearsal, which we were fortunate enough to be able to capture today. And then we're going to go back to the studio and we'll get your answer, all right?
Sounds great.
Mit langsam Hause, wie seine letzte Geliebte sein. In seinen Hirn steckt wie ein Nagel. Die mit langsam Hause, schlank wie die Biene aus Hause. Wo lustig wird sie, die Hirne.
Well, the Pierrot is a group, he actually called it a melodrama or a series of melodramas. And it was written not for a famous soprano, but rather for a famous actress, Albertina Zema. Am I saying that right, guys?
Close enough, right?
Okay. And she commissioned it from Schoenberg. She had already had another set written for her that she wasn't so pleased with. And so she approached Schoenberg, and he wrote this set of 21 pieces. It's also Opus 21. He calls it thrice times 7 songs in 3 parts. And they were meant for their really recitation, sort of, not singing, not speaking exactly. And Jean-Marie and Lanfranco can go more into this particular unusual vocal technique. But they're really a theater piece. And when it was first performed, Albertina was in the front of the stage in this white face, looking like Pierrot from the old Commedia dell'arte, and Schoenberg and the ensemble were actually behind a screen. So it was very much a theatrical sort of monodrama in a way, mono opera, whatever you want to call it.
Interesting.
But the pieces are very effective. Some of them are shocking. Some of them are macabre and almost frightening, especially if you follow along with what's going on in the text. And just watching the 5 instrumentalists work together and the way they keep changing, even though it's limited to the 5 players, the violin is playing muted, then not muted, then on the bridge, and the clarinetist is switching between A clarinet and bass clarinet, and is there B flat in one?
There is B flat.
Flute and piccolo. I mean, there's so much variety going on. There's violin and viola, I should say. There's so much variety going on that it's like you have a full little, orchestra there. So very effective. It's just fun to watch what the instrumentalists do, even if you're not so tuned into the text.
Now, do you feel when you perform a piece like this that you need to set you need to set it up for the audience themselves, or not necessarily? You just want to have them experience it, relate with the text and what they're hearing and seeing, or how does that work for you?
Well, whatever I say, I think that's what I think. I don't know. Each audience is different. Some audience need more or less. But I think a piece like that, you do have to have a different mind. It comes from this time that expression has a different meaning of the expression we think in the romantic way.
Right.
The expression in the sounds are in the sounds, are not in the harmonies and how the harmony go one after the other, but how you create a sensation. They call this expressionism when they talk about Schoenberg, but I think the expressionism, for me, there is this thing about to get, is different to get an impressionism, like we thought about Debussy. You have the impression. You have no impression. You have an impact thing, a sound that impacts you, and you are there, and you absorb that. And I find sometimes very interesting if you can have a talk to the audience before, even to players. I think when you do new music with an orchestra, many times it's important, even among us, to realize what kind of mind we have to play those notes. What's the meaning?
Exactly.
Because they seem like they have no meaning. What's incredible about this piece, it's even if when we listen, it seems so random sometimes. Nothing was random about it.
I'm sure.
It's meticulous.
It's meticulous, everything. He had a method. He created a new method, like we create the harmony, and we say that that's a harmony. He created this whole harmony, putting notes in a series, and 12 notes would be a series, and he did 12 notes, and he builds measures vertically. So there is a huge table work there that is fascinating, how he can be expressive with the limitation of all the technique, which has to be said that Pierrot comes after a moment. Between 1908-9, he actually composed he had a huge amount of what they call dodecaphonic pieces, which is this new technique that he created, about 12 sounds, one after the other. You respect this series, this order, and you can switch the order from backwards, front, and you can mirror the order. You can play with it.
So some people, would know this as a 12-tone scale. Is that correct?
Yeah,
no?
that's would be idea would be a 12-tone scale.
Okay.
Let's put, because later Second World War becomes what we call serialism. Is actually just something that comes after the decaphone. It's not necessarily 12 notes. Could be 6 notes, 7 notes. Could be actually a series of dynamics, loud,
soft, loud and soft. Everything's set in a series.
But that's the structure you work with.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And
Okay.
1908 and 9, he composed opera, songs, orchestra, a huge amount, and he gets, which a piece that I can't come my mind was just 1911, just a year or two before that. He gets to this maximal idea of this technique condensed to a point that things becomes really so strict in tempo as well, very short pieces. And then he relaxes a little, and Pierrot is the beginning of this relaxing moment a little. I think the idea that he takes for actress, which has this cabaret idea, theater idea, to put an actress sing, and he's very strict, but at the same time he starts to be more flexible in order to get more the drama that he needs, especially being, like she said, a mono opera or something like that, a monodrama. And I think, yes, I think it's important with the sound, also because she has, and she can talk about that, it's very difficult for her. She doesn't speak and she doesn't sing.
Right. Clearly
we
not.
call-
Not either, but.
But yeah, something.
And is there a name given to that?
Sprechstimme.
Okay.
What you speak voice.
Right.
So in the translation, and I think that in itself creates idea of drama. It's like when you go to his opera, Moses and Aaron. One sing, the other ones recite
Right.
Sprechstimme all the time. In itself, that creates an impact. That even if you are not absorbed by any melody or sound, you're absorbed by the impact of how people transmit that to you.
And is calling it intoned speech correct, or is that really not right? No, it's not, because
No.
it's precise. There is a note there.
Yes.
Yes.
And in performing it, you really can't go to I'm singing this or I'm just speaking this. Must be a real difficult thing to do.
It's very difficult for me. There are about 7 pitches that he writes to be sung. And he writes very clearly over those pitches, these notes are to be sung. The rest are either called notes that are to be sprechstimmt in rhythm and following the rhythm and the text of the piece. Or sometimes he asks for toneless, like whispering, and hissing. And he asks sometimes for a flutter in the voice, but not on any particular pitch. Some of it is like whining. It reminds me of whining.
There is one thing I would like to add. May I? Sorry to interrupt.
Please, no.
Yeah, please.
There is a structure of the contour of the notes that gives you an idea. For example, saying la riba dio. These things in some ways written as pitch. We would hear that would be the real pitch. But if you do
Yeah.
you're already getting the structure in some way of the pitch. He actually really he didn't expect, especially even right for actress, I think she could barely sing in tone. Imagine sing the right pitch. No, nothing against her. She's not around anymore.
Yeah, right.
But anyhow,
Unfortunately.
it's easier to say that now. But I mean, I can't imagine that she could do that with the real pitch. But I don't think the structure, yes.
Yeah. He really did not care for singing teachers too much, from what I gather. In the preface in his 1911 theory book, 1911 was a very big year for him.
Yeah.
And his theory book, which I was driven to because I could not figure out what this really was. What is this? I wasn't getting it. So knowing that he teaches theory, I wanted to see if he taught regular theory with chords and cadences, and he did. He taught very traditional theory. And he did say that everything he learned from his students. And he went on to say in the next paragraph that he was not infallible. But the only ones who are infallible are singing teachers. So with that really turned a light on for me, because it seemed to me he had an attitude about what singers thought of themselves and what singing teachers thought of themselves. And so approaching this, I've accepted the fact that it's all right to make mistakes in it and not have it perfect. In the Strauss, not so.
Not so.
Not so. You need to sing the
Well, no,
pitch
and
that's
someone
there.
will never know if you do.
Yeah,
right?
well, that, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
believe
Yeah.
me. You'll know, right?
Yeah, but I think his mind, even when he was a boy, he invented a game of chess that could be played with 4 players on the same board from 4 different sides.
Wow.
So he just had this gift with numbers and how combinations could work. So I guess that's Gestalt. You see the whole picture and not necessarily the individual pieces. And I see the pieces, I don't see the big picture sometimes. But that's a part of the puzzle that I've been putting together in learning this and in starting to perform it.
Now, in the performance, we have conductor, we have singer, we have player. I mean, so you really all have to converge in this particular style and really be very attentive to every single moment. I'm sure that's, part of the fun, but it's also one of the challenges.
Schoenberg had 40 rehearsals for the first performance. We have 10, but it really is, each song is perhaps the longest is maybe 2 minutes tops.
Yeah.
Some of them are only, 40 seconds, 50 seconds, but they're difficult, and they're difficult from this layering effect and how the instruments dovetail in with the voice and the very complex rhythms with the speech and the voice, and everything sort of combining together makes them very difficult to work out. I can't imagine not doing it with a conductor. I really can't.
It's very difficult,
complicated.
especially because the singer doesn't have much help as a pulsation that gives the singer to know where to start and where to finish. It seems just everything open in the air. I find it's a very challenging piece.
I would imagine, but exciting.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Very
Yeah.
effective. I think even if you're not familiar with this idiom of music, that you're pulled into it. The Sprechstimme is attention-getting. It's different than hearing singing, and you can't sort of let go of hearing it. It draws you in, and it's fascinating and kind of at the same time, what is that?
I think I like the phrase you use of letting go, and in fact of experience it as an audience, as a listener, really. And there's always been this challenge with new pieces or contemporary pieces, and being interwoven with something that's more traditional. That people tend to react pretty strongly to something that they're not familiar with the way it sounds. That's why I asked about the setup. And yet, the whole idea of experiencing something different and having it become exciting for you as well, and I think that comes out of the performance.
Can I say something about Schoenberg specifically? I myself, I actually lived in Vienna, and people can't talk about him. I think still now, So he had a very hard time. But I mean, I remember later in my late 20s, one day I was working a lot about preparing something, writing, and I have to write nights and nights, and I couldn't. I was just very tired one day. And I normally listen always to music, and classical music, my music, but I listen to Bach, I listen to song when I work something that's writing. And that night, I was so terribly tired that none of the music I could really handle. I couldn't put a Mozart, I couldn't put a Bach, I couldn't put even Mahler. I said, what do I do? I need the music here. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. And I found the CD that I had of Schoenberg, of all the piano works. And I said, well, I heard the CD such a long time ago, let me put the CD. And that moment, the CD really told all the feelings I was having that moment and helped me extremely to study. And that moment was enlightening for me, how I would approach. Because you see, it comes in the time of Freud, turn of the century. Some truth of Freud was like to break our society. Everything was being broken. The quietness on the streets, electrical things that make noise. Right. So the noise is part of the thing. The idea that everybody don't have all the thoughts that Freud created, the whole sexual element was so scary for our society. But everything was being broken. The thing we hear music that's practically broken, but with a lot of structure behind. That was what the incredible thing. He kind of said, we cannot go on with this music as it is. There is too many things going on, new. And he breaks that. Of course, he didn't think, because he was part of this break. And he breaks, but creating a new element.
Yes.
But when you hear, that's why it's the difficulty, because normally we sometimes go to create illusion. You go to a concert, to a theater, to have an illusion, to forget your everyday, to forget a moment that you are tired, to forget, then you want to dream. This music doesn't invite you to dream. It invites you actually to stay on earth.
Yeah.
And quite on earth, maybe more than you were living before. It's like to go to a piece of theater that someone delivers to you a text that you end up and you want just to kill yourself.
Like shakes you up.
Yeah. And that, I think, the element of most of 20th century music, not all, but most that went in this sense, they didn't regard more that experience that was before. Because what was is, how can we go on with this language? In some way, unconsciously, maybe Freud would say, reflecting what was happening in the world. Because the First World War is just...
everything's gearing
it's just
up
three,
right now.
yeah, the world will go on war 3 years later after this peace, to 1914, no? So it goes just 2 years later after. So there was, these people really felt the society, how it was going. And of course, it's difficult to listen. I don't think, but that's the thing. If you turn your switch,
right,
then probably, I don't know if it's pleasure, but intensity you can sense.
Well, see, I get excited by this because, you know, I'm not familiar with this piece, and so this is something that would you know, excite me enough to say, you know, I want to experience it, and that's why, going all the way back to an earlier question of setting it up, I mean, if you know a little bit more about it, I think you can relax more and let it happen, and then maybe not relax after you hear it. We want to have some samples of what this sounds like. So I'd like to have you set up what we're going to be listening to. Okay?
So it's really a masterpiece of composition. A white fleck of bright moon on the back of his black coat, Pierrot sets off one balmy evening to seek his fortune. Personally, I think he's going out gambling, but suddenly, something's awry in his costume, in his toilette. He casts about until he finds it, a white fleck of bright moon on the back of his coat. Drat! He thinks a fleck of plaster, and he wipes it, and he wipes it, and he keeps wiping, and nothing comes off. It's still on there. Also, he goes on and seeks his pleasure, poisoned now. Everything is off. He has no luck now. Rubbing until break of day, a white fleck of moonlight.
Wow, how wonderful.
So,
how wonderful. Okay, so let's, with that set up, let's go and listen to this, okay?
Einen weißen Fleck des hellen Mondes auf dem Rücken seines schwarzen Rockes. So spaziert Pierrot im lauen Abend auf zu suchen Glück und Abenteuer. Plötzlich stört ihn was an seinem Anzug. Er besieht sich rings und findet richtig einen weißen Fleck des hellen Mondes auf dem Rücken seines schwarzen Rocks. Warte, denkt er, das ist so ein Gipsfleck. Wischt und wischt, doch bringt ihn nicht herunter. Und so geht er giftgeschworen weiter, reibt und reibt bis auf den frühen Morgen einen weißen Fleck des hellen Mondes.
Is there anything more you want to talk about Schoenberg before we move over to Strauss?
I just have one thing to say about it. It's very odd pairing of such revolutionary music and sound with a character from the 16th century, Commedia dell'arte. Pierrot is an old stand-up, warm-up-the-crowd person. And the three parts, first, Pierrot is leaving his familiar surroundings in the first part, and he finds a world that's changing, like the modern world was changing at the time. And then the second part is everything is dreary and grotesque and awful and just depressing and confusing. And then in the third part, he decides to go back to Commedia dell'arte, where he got a start and where he belonged and where he felt comfortable. And in the nature of the piece, the music, the last piece, I can't wait for the last piece. It's wonderful. It's going home again. And that's a lovely pairing of something that would have been a common text, Mascagni, or Leoncavallo, Pagliacci, same story.
Okay.
But
Actually, I have to say about the end of the piece, because our 7/7/7, by the end, he makes a way to structure that goes towards idea of tonality. You know, he even works towards this E flat major chord. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the fact that what you say in the text, he's trying also in some way to give a way back
The title
home.
is
Journey.
Der Alter,
Alter
Yeah.
Old Scent.
Yeah.
And so there's that
Oh, wow.
scent of tonality. So it's all tied in. It's very effective writing.
Well, and probably another time I would say to heck with Strauss, but I'm not going to do that because I said I love Strauss. So let's move on and to talk about the Strauss and how these pieces came to be.
Right.
So how did this all evolve?
So he wrote Abendrot, which is based on a text by Eichendorff, who was an old romantic German poet that Schumann said and Brahms said Eichendorff
Yeah.
text. And he wrote this first as an isolated song. And Abendrot is a twilight or sunset.
Yeah.
And it was meant as a separate song. And it's a beautiful song. He was, I think, 83 or 84 when he wrote the song. And it was after he'd written Capriccio. It was very, very late in his life. And an admirer knew he'd written this one standalone song and thought that he would send text of Hermann Hesse, which he did. And Strauss was immediately taken by these texts. And he initially planned to set 4 of the Hesse texts to pair with the Eichendorff. And instead, he only got through 3, and they're only sketches for the 4th of the Hesse. So there originally should have been 5 last songs, but there were only 4. And he even died before the proofing was done at the music publishers. So the order is not Strauss's, it's someone who set it up much later in the 1950s, because Strauss died in 1949. And so we actually, of course, this is a gigantic orchestral piece.
Oh, yes.
That includes quotations from Death and Transfiguration, one of his great tone poems. And in many ways is sort of looking back on his life, and the texts include all these euphemisms about death and transcending death. They're beautiful poems. And so what we've done is we have a chamber arrangement by William Kerrigan for altogether 7 instruments, and soprano, of course. And William Kerrigan had the idea to put the order back in the order that they were composed, which is the Eichendorff song first, and then the 3 Hesse texts in the order that he wrote them, ending with the one I think is the most transcendent of all the songs, which is Beim Schlafengehen. So they're gorgeous, and I'll let these guys talk more about the actual small parts of it.
I know Strauss, listen to me. Strauss in all of the composers, you know, when asked who is your favorite composer, had a friend who had a large collection, an artist himself, and he would introduce you, and when I first went there, introduce and saying, this is my Mozart, and this is where my Wagner is, and then he goes, and this is my Strauss. And when he said that, you could just feel that he was embracing this as his very, very favorite, and there's so much to embrace with Strauss. So let's talk about Strauss himself a bit and his specialness as a composer and artist.
Well, I think for me what calls the attention for Strauss is the kind of anachronism that he lived in the 20th century, like doing pieces that is not so anachronic, like out of his time, like Rachmaninoff, let's put it this way, but keeping a German tradition that came from Brahms, from Bruckner, and then eventually Mahler, that, you know, and keep this, not only the idea of size of orchestration, because the size are huge. And it has to be said that after the Second World War, people, and already before, especially after the First World War, people were cutting down because the orchestra were too big, but he kept composing for this thing. So the idea that Strauss, for me, bring this big element, it's something already so out of context, because Schoenberg actually, by the way, write the Pelléa et Mélisande very early in his career, and it's also for 8 horns and double woodwind.
Or Gurlieder.
Or Gurlieder. It's huge. But then after he stops, and even Stravinsky, when he goes to Pulcinella in 1920s, he reduced the orchestra. It becomes a small thing after Rite of Spring, Firebird. And Strauss, until 48, when he composed, he insists in the major ensemble. So I think that already says a lot about his language. And of course, I think the romanticism in Strauss is something that is a piece that, you know, like Pierrot is difficult sometimes to understand. Strauss sometimes is dangerous because you can become an extra romantic in Strauss, and that's not what he really thought. It's funny, he has a simplicity. Strauss is a Mozart in the 20th century for me. I find he's a Mozart in the 20th. It's beautiful singing, phrase. It's not that thing that, you know, it's not Mahler.
Anguished.
Exactly, it's not this anguish. It's that, no, there is, actually, it's very interesting. You said there is the Death and the Transfiguration. You know, there is a part of his stone poem that actually he wrote, Death and Transfiguration, which is dying, very young. He was in his 30s. And apparently, when he wrote the last songs, his son came to him. His son tells the story later and said, Dad, how are you doing? He said, you know, I actually was right with the piece. Death is really dead. So when he was dying, so he actually, but he puts that here. I don't know how much by Schlafengehen, the choice, he was already very sick at that time. He knew he would leave. Do you know what I mean? He knew
he's
he was
departing. I mean, this is a whole process he's going through.
Yeah, and I tell you, the first time I conduct that, you have a constantly sense of departing, but not death in a bad way. It's transcendent. So I think the piece brings you a lot that, and it's breathtaking when you are doing to feel that sense that someone is saying goodbye. It's like for me personally, if the goodbye happened 5 years later, to listen to the 3 last piano sonatas by Beethoven, 109, 10, and 11. Every time I cry at the end because I said, that's a real testimony. Someone get, that's my patrimony to the world. And then you listen and said, he's saying goodbye. He never composed anything after. In the case of Strauss, there was like Bartók at the end. He composed until he practically died. You know, so there are people who die composing. But I mean, there is a sense of he was aware in the songs. And I find what is the beautiful about the songs, you need a real great singer because it's so difficult to sing. Well, she can tell you that. Every time I conduct, I'm so sorry for the singer because it's a huge line. You have to have a machine behind give you air, do you know, because there is not enough air for everything.
A spare lung, that would be handy. But Strauss himself had said that he didn't consider himself a first-rate composer, but of second-rate composers, I am first class. Those quotes, I probably bastardized that in some form or fashion, but he really knew people, I think, more than Schoenberg did. Schoenberg knew numbers, but in Strauss, you just, in the line of music itself, whether it's sung or orchestral, you know there's some deep emotion being given to you, you're not being clobbered by it. You're being lured into the essence of the meaning of the text in combination with the sound.
As a singer, are you inhabited by does the music just go inside of you? I mean, are you one with the music? Is it, I mean, I'm just thinking about it. I mean, I'm hearing it in my mind, and I'm just wondering how this comes out. You know the words you're singing, and they relate really clearly to what's being the music. And so, do you understand what I'm asking you?
Yes. Anytime you sing something that you really like, you have to detach yourself from its impact upon you. Because if you let yourself go with what's going on, you won't be able to sing. You get all choked up.
Yeah.
So when I listen to this, I can just hear it. And then the reaction that I have, the natural reaction, it's okay for me to cry and get choked up or think of someone I cared for who died too soon, or, I think of all these death scenes that have occurred in real life, or passings or closures. That's fine when I listen, but when I sing it, I'm really thinking about where is my third lung most of the time.
Okay.
While I'm very clear on what I'm trying to convey in the text. And I do always, when I sing, I have to know what it is that I'm singing, or else it won't have any meaning. The porch lights are on, but no one's home. I have to know it's a visceral. I find Strauss to be more visceral than Schoenberg.
Okay.
And it's easier for me to get it than to get Schoenberg. So I sing it from a point of view of I'm a messenger, and it's my honor to give the message, and so I'm humbled by both, but in far different ways. And in Strauss, and particularly in these songs, these are his last words through other poets, but this is his last gesture. So I'm honored to help pass that down aspect of
We're running out of time, so I just want to. I know we want to listen to one of the songs, and so I want to set it up, and so let's do that first, and then we'll see where we're going to go from here. Okay.
All right.
Jean, I know you have to go a bit early today, so I'm sorry you're not going to be able to stay for the rest of the conversation, but I really want to thank you very much for being on the show, and I look forward to hearing you in performance, as well as I hope our viewers will as well. And I don't know if you say good luck to you, but all the best to you in this piece. It was nice having you here.
Thank you very much.
As we did before we listen, I want to set up the piece so we can really enjoy it to the fullest. So if you want to give us some insights into it and set it up.
Beim Schlafengehen is this lovely, I'm going to call it a lullaby. I don't think he actually calls it a lullaby in the musical designation, but that's really what it is. And it's a euphemism for somebody passing on. But they go on. They left this life, but they go on. And it's beautiful. First of all, the music is just incredible. I don't know another adjective for it.
No, that's good.
It's first of all, it's set in this key. It starts out in A-flat major, which for the instrumentation is a very, in some ways, muted key.
Yeah.
Very few overtones, so it's a very mellow, rich key. And then it moves, as if A-flat major isn't difficult enough, it moves to D-flat major, which is even more muted. And it features, even in the full orchestral score, a solo violin singing in counterpoint with the voice. This just beautiful line, I mean, achingly beautiful.
Achingly beautiful.
And it just keeps dovetailing in and out. And by the way, the violin solo doesn't come in on the first stanza, it waits to come in, so that it's almost like this otherworldly voice, an angel from somewhere. And it goes back and forth between the voice and the violin and the other instruments kind of supporting it. And I should probably mention that Strauss's wife was a very, very fine soprano.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
What was her first name? Anna, I think?
I actually don't know, in the sense I don't remember, at least.
She sang in a lot of the premieres of his operas, and Intermezzo was written for her.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And she was a really fine soprano. So in a way, writing these four last songs is much more than just, gee, I always wrote for the voice. There's a very personal element to it.
Yeah.
And the horn is also very prominent in all these songs. And his father was this
because of his father.
Yes.
His father was a great
horn player.
He wrote 2 horn concertos, actually.
Yes, he did.
Yes.
The first and the second, and one very young, and later when his father passed away.
He had
so
passed
there,
away, yes.
there the relation with the violin. One thing I would actually like to add about when you said that, I don't know if it was you or Jean said, the human part actually was the human part of Strauss is so strong that Solti tells a story that one time this conductor, Solti from Hungary, went to visit Strauss. And he was very quiet. He would not speak much, actually not at all. And he looked at the maestro and said, "Maestro, I have sometimes doubt about the tempi for the opera." And he said, "Just speak the text." So this idea of saying human speak, so he was so human in that sense that he takes the tempo, the speed of the piece accordingly, how a person would speak that in a theater, of course. And I love that little thing. When I read that, gave me a huge hint about how to deal with his music. He is a man that, unlike Schoenberg, as you know, is actually looking what is inside humanly to bring out. And Schoenberg was bring something that was seemingly outside from us, you know, which is not true. It's also inside. Just we avoid, and we don't want to look many times.
How nice. All right, let's listen to it.
Yeah.
Und
I must say, I absolutely love her voice, and as I said, I love this piece, and I know that if you are attracted to this grouping, I'm sure there is an individual favorite because it's been done a lot, and you know, Tikanawa is one of my favorites with this as well, and you know, it really just I think it just overtakes you. You know, having a dry eye after listening is really difficult for me. And I think I experienced it. I told you I experienced it first by hearing a snatch in the Year of Living Dangerously. And I realized recently that in the Hours, there's also a segment of it in there as well. You know, and every time I hear it, I want to forget the movie and listen to it.
Right. It's really a very special experience to go through these songs, and I think live adds that much more to it. It's very special.
Yeah, how very, very nice. And you know, I want to just go a little bit further with this question. I hope you'll indulge me with this. And as far as a you know, performer, you know, playing the music and a conductor, as to it comes clear to me by saying it habits you. I mean, where do you go when you're involved in this whole process? Where do you know, transcend, or how do you transcend? Or, I mean, it's not just you keeping beat and bringing people in. There's something happening to you as well.
I think there are many different people and many different conductors, the way each one will feel in that moment. In my case, I think there is one Lanfranco for the rehearsals and one Lanfranco for the concerts.
Okay.
In the rehearsal, I hate the rehearsals. And I really hate rehearsals. And I came to realize why I hate, because when I'm rehearsing, I have fun. If someone sees me rehearse, I like to rehearse. I'm very meticulous. I like to repeat, because I actually am not allowed during the rehearsal to feel the impact that you know, I have to be constantly listening, and from whatever I expect inside, see if that's happening outside, if there is any way I can help the players, because I think for me, a conducting in some way is supposed to help the players, not only to play together, but we get to a certain point together, not only in tempo. And sometimes it's difficult in that moment for me, because when it comes to the concert, I'm not supposed to speak, I'm not supposed to stop, and whatever happens, we have to go on.
That's right, that's right.
In that moment, I enjoy tremendously. You know, I actually felt very bad about that, because I always thought, God, you're so bad. The first time I started, very at the beginning, I met a very wise man who was a violinist. I actually come from Brazil. And it's good to say, because my English is so poor many times.
Oh, not at all.
It's better to say before I do many mistakes.
But you waited till after we talked, though.
Yes, right.
Just that. But anyhow, I met this man who came actually from Italy and lived in Argentina and was one of the violinists at the Colonie, and then retired in Brazil. And I was starting, and he helped me a lot to understand especially strings and things. And he would sit down to me and said, look, there are many kinds of conductors. And I think that's true for everybody. But conductor, you have to see them working, because a pianist alone home, you don't see them practicing. But he said, there are good conductors in rehearsals and bad in concerts. There are one bad in rehearsals and good in concert. And there were one bad in both and good in both. and I always kept this thing in my mind. I said, God, I'm the one bad in rehearsal and good in concert.
He's a good one.
Yeah, but I actually enjoy rehearsal sometimes when I look myself doing, but it's because of that. I cannot allow myself to dream in that moment, because I'm just concerned, what's this person playing? Am I together? The mechanics of it.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I actually have to say, when I'm alone home, I can get extremely excited. Last week I was studying the thing here. I walked through the house, sing the thing, trying, and I was actually doing by heart already. I actually knew the thing, and it was like, haha. But when I get in front of the group, I'm not supposed to go around dancing and conducting and screaming.
Of course.
So it gets, but in the moment of the concert, I find always very magical.
Right.
For me, a concert, and I hope in my life doesn't become a routine. It's always an event. Even if we had to do, I did some years ago a tour with an orchestra, and we are doing this Dvorak Ninth Symphony, the New World. And we did the first, the second performance. By the third, I said, I can't handle this thing again. Something new has to come. So I looked to the concert master, that was in Chile with the National Symphony. I said, can we do different something today, because I'm really tired. And he said, sure, maestro, you do, we go with you. I think he didn't realize what he told me. I just changed everything there. I kept changing the tempo, and the whole orchestra went with me. And I do believe, I have a strong, I don't believe music has a truth. I don't believe. There is your truth, but not one truth. Yeah, the truth, what is written here. But what she sees when she reads, and what I see when I read, even if we have the same metronome marking,
So different.
it's extremely different. And I find that I came to arrive, when I was young, I thought everybody should play in a way. But I said, how boring would be if everybody plays the same way.
Of course.
And I get bored if I start to do the same way. That's why I thought the pieces like that, or like the Strauss, is always to see a friend again after many years. You like the same, but it's not the same anymore. Because you live time.
Sure.
And people change with time. They bring a luggage with them, and they open this luggage, and there are new things in the luggage. And as artists, or whatever you do, I think, it's not as an artist, as a person, we do want, if I meet a person 10 years after, to know what happened.
Yep. Yep.
And I think, I cannot see, I look forward to see, I'm very curious, in 10 years, how do I think, Piero? And in 20? And I guarantee you will not be the same.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
And that, but I find a lot of this truth during the performance. I never found the truth home or during the rehearsals. Never.
Nice.
Never. And there was a major singer, how is her name, Italian singer, that now is retired, Mirella Freni.
Mm-hmm.
One time someone got behind the curtain and said, Madame, how do you feel now before you enter in this major role? She said, curious. I said, curious? Yeah, because I don't know how it is once I'm there.
There you go.
You know, with the costume, with the lights, with the people. There is another way to feel things. When I teach conduct, I say, let these things impact on you. Because if it doesn't impact, what are you?
Exactly. Exactly.
Do you know? But you have to learn to be vulnerable during the concert, and that's kind of difficult. And the rehearsal, that's what I don't like. I cannot be vulnerable in rehearsals.
I knew this would happen to me. We're really, really getting close to the end of our time here, and I obviously want to talk about the concert,
Yeah.
and where it's going to be, and when it's going to be, and if you have tickets, how do you get tickets, and your information. So let's go through all of that right now.
The mechanics.
Okay?
Let's go.
It sounded dirty here.
Yes. All right, there are two performances. The first is Saturday, March 1st at 8 o'clock at Union College in their beautiful new Taylor Music Center, which is not the Memorial Chapel. It's across the quadrangle from
Okay.
it. It's a small hall that only seats about 200. It's gorgeous
Beautiful
acoustics and very nice piano, so it's a very nice location. So that's Saturday, March 1st at 8, and then the next performance is Sunday, March 2nd at 3 at the Opalka Gallery, which is part of the Sage College Albany campus on New Scotland Avenue.
right.
And it's tied in with an art exhibition by an American artist who does a lot of exhibiting in Vienna. So there's that neat tie-in with Schoenberg.
Okay. Now, ticket.
$20 for adults, $10 for students, and people can purchase them either at the door or by calling 518-377-3623.
Great. And it's going to be right up there now as you say it. So.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, anything more you want to add before we close? I could keep talking to you for, as you well know, so hopefully we can do this again sometime. This has really been a pleasure, but is there anything else you want to add?
I think people will, even if you're afraid of 20th century music, and this is an entirely 20th century program, you will walk away being really pleased that you saw the performance and that every piece will appeal to the listener.
Wonderful, wonderful. I can't wait for it.
Me too.
Thanks again for being my guest today.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us.
And thank you for joining me on Getting to Know You. I hope you did enjoy today's program. I sure did. And I hope you'll join us next time. Until then, have a good one.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.